Era of motorsports, I always got this man because he can slow down. Herman is too fast, but everybody needs to know. Now we can't go to the racetracks, and the news we get is not really what's going on. So join us every week. Herman Sierra has the latest in NASCAR, F1, Formula E, IndyCar, whatever has a big engine with thousands of horsepower, he knows about it. So he's going to tell you all about what happened this last weekend and what we're looking forward. Herman Sierra, go ahead.
Thank you, Ricardo. Welcome once again to Bleav in Auto Racing on the Bleav Podcast Network. And once again, I want to welcome you, Ricardo Rodriguez-Long from GarageLatino, to dissect what was the 104th running of the Indianapolis 500. And we were able to crown a winner, not a young winner, but a veteran Japanese driver, Takuma Sato, that crowned himself as a second-time Indianapolis 500 winner. Ricardo.
And that's big. That's big news. And I think he deserved it. I mean, he is a hard charger, and he did, he had a tough time in Formula One. He'd run 90 Grand Prix, but I think Indianapolis is a very, very special place. And, starting with Carl Fischler, because this man back in 1908, he wanted to create this racetrack and it's supposed to be a road course, a 3-mile road course. And then in the nick of time, races start happening. That says we need to capitalize on these. We need a place, where cars can be tested for reliability, something that a lot of automakers in the United States were not really doing. He says that Europeans are doing it. We need a place to test vehicles. And that's how kind of it sparked Indianapolis. And interesting that when Indianapolis was created, the first race, it was not a car race. It was a balloon race because this man was into balloon racing. And after that, motorcycles started racing there. And then the cars came in. So the first 2-3 years of Indianapolis, the racetrack, are very interesting and things that created such a history and tradition because the first automotive races were just lethal. I mean, a lot of injuries, a lot of things happened because they were running on gravel. So as they were going on speed, this gravel was, throwing rocks at the competitors behind and people were, bleeding, and their cars were getting damaged. So they were like, okay, stop. This is not a good idea. So what do we need to do for this to work? And at that time, in 1909, the best road surfaces were bricks. So they say, why don't we pave this racetrack with bricks, and it only took 2.5 million bricks to pave the miles. It was an exorbitant cost that today would have been millions of dollars. And that's how it became known as the Brickyard because it's a racetrack made out of bricks. And it was very, very interesting. And that first race, there were several races, but then they decided to have one single event and make it the largest, people where crowds could come in. So 30,000 people came to this brick racetrack, and it was a sensation. Manufacturers got involved. The first 500-mile race had 2 foreign manufacturers, being Fiat and Benz. And after that, it's history. People from all over the world came over. All manufacturers joined in this, real 500-mile testing of machines and men, and has become such an iconic place that it's hard to describe to the audience. If you've never been there during a race day, it's such a special place because everything else that is going on. And this year was very unusual with no crowds. So that's a little bit of the history. And how do we get to 2020 where, Roger Penske gets the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and now there's almost no race, so that was a tough pill. And then also during testing and carb day and qualifying, the Penske team did not do well at all. So it was an interesting, right after the first couple of laps, you could see that everybody has some kind of different strategies to see how they're going to be able to challenge Scott Dixon, because that was the man.
That's right. And speaking of strategy and speaking of Chip Ganassi Racing, it was very interesting because from the beginning of the race, it looked like they split the strategies between their drivers. Of course, prioritizing Scott Dixon with the better strategy, but they put Felix Rosenquist in a different strategy, kind of like covering their bases in case something were to happen along the race.
Right.
And, that was an amazing story about the history of Indianapolis. And this is the type of track that historically has picked the winner. It's the racetrack that picks the winner, and it's not necessarily the fastest car that wins the race. I do agree that Takuma Sato had the fastest car at that point of the race, but let's say, Scott Dixon had the car to beat all day, pretty much all month of August.
Yeah, it was, you could see that they were fast in qualifying. They showed that they could, be on pole. It's just all through the race, it was Scott Dixon's to lose in a way. And it was, it was the Indy 500. So there were yellows, there were accidents, there were a lot of pit stop mistakes. There were driver errors. There was a lot of, things keep happening all the time. And right off the bat, just on lap 2, we already have, an encounter, Ed Carpenter and Beach, touched. Beach.
Like Beach, correct.
I'm not sure if he saw him or not. His spotter didn't give him the room, but unfortunately, Ed had to end up, he just ended touching the wall and he damaged the suspension and it cost him 12 or 13 laps to fix the car. And then he went back into running. But, 13 laps down, there's really no choice to get in the podium. But, again, there were a lot of interesting things. I was hoping that the Spaniard, Alex Palau, he was doing a pretty good race all throughout, but I think it's his first time at the Speedway. He tried to be nice, making room for somebody else to pass, and he paid the price. He got into the marbles, and after that, there was no way he controlled the car. So it was a shame for him.
Right. There's always that outside line at the Speedway that once you get into that gray area of the track, you just become a passenger and there's nothing you can do. He did have a very good race. I was very impressed with Santino Ferrucci.
Oh yeah.
He was making an amazing moves against his veteran drivers that have thousands and thousands of miles at this racetrack. Very impressed with obviously Rahul Letterman. They were very consistent throughout the month. They were not all the fastest. They were not on top of the charts, but they showed the consistency throughout the month. And, you see obviously Takuma Sato winning the race and then Graham Rahal finishing third, and excellent finish for that team.
I think also that VK, and, Venus Rique had a very good showing.
Yes, absolutely too. And I was very disappointed with. I was expecting a lot more from the Andretti Autosports. They claimed the pole with Marco Andretti, and I don't know. Sunday came and they just didn't bring it for the 500.
Just on the first lap alone, unfortunately Andretti already had lost 2 places, and it seems like every lap he was going down until he settled around the 8-9 place, and that's pretty much where he stayed the whole race. So definitely they did not have, I don't know if it is speed or what, but they were lacking something. I think Rossi did a very good job. And again, I don't know if you hear what happened. They had where the strategy seats, and all the mechanics, they have problems with their, what they call that, Pete mobile unit, where they have all the computers and all that.
Yes, some kind of transponder they were having an issue with. Where it was
they were overheating. They were overheating and they lost the communication. And that's what happens when one time, I don't know if you remember, I don't know what lap it was, but he meant to go into the pits and then everybody thought, did he miss the pit stop or what happened? And they thought they lost the communication and he was, Alexander Rossi wasn't sure of going into the pits or not. He lifted and that cost him dearly. So by the time he get back into the pits, he was way, way behind. He had an incredible charge. That's the second or third lap when he came back, being almost last. He passed 5 cars in one corner, between corners, which is a daredevil movement. But to me, it was like, okay, he's going all for it. And his risk level now, it's grown exponentially. So when he hit the wall, I was just not surprised. He was really upset and trying to push too hard.
And I think at that point where he got that unsafe release penalty from the pits, it kind of, I think that the timing of that penalty, if it would have been earlier on the race, I think he would have a much calmer recovery. But it was such at a late stage of the race that I think, the stress of getting back, knowing that he had a competitive car to fight for a win. It was just a shame that he wasn't able to do that, and it just trickled down from there. Just it was just a shame. He was the only competitive car from the Andretti camp that showed that was going to be a potential winner. At the beginning, I did see Ryan Hunter-Reay charging for the front, but then again, just I don't know if it was the track conditions that changed. They just couldn't keep up with the track conditions, and it shows also with Alexander Rossi that when he went to the back, the difference of the air, the turbulence, and how much the car changes going through traffic.
Yeah, and also this is the first year that they run, the 500-mile race with this new canopy on top of the car, and that canopy, it's adding about 50 to 60 pounds of weight. So this is very significant. That additional strain on the tires. I'm sure it affects not just the tire longevity, but also the suspension in terms of geometry, because you put in more pressure right in the middle of the car. So I think that made it even harder for some people, because at Indianapolis, everybody is right on the edge, and everybody is so good at driving these cars that it doesn't seem, it seems easy, but you can see that all these cars are right on the edge, and it takes very, very little to make a mistake. And when you make a mistake, it can cost you a crash, or it can cost you 5 or 6 places that people just go by. It's very hard to pick up the speed again, to get that momentum. I was surprised that, when Derek, not Derek, but Connor Daly, when they interview him, that he says, "I don't know exactly what happened. It's my fault." He said, "Yeah, you went over the cement line.
Right.
You were going to lose the car. You barely get off that wheel on the cement, and you lost all traction." So he was lucky that nothing really happened to him. But I feel bad for the McLaren driver that he just panicked, and unfortunately,
it was a
I
hard
guess
hit.
it's the lack of experience on at that particular moment that he lost the car, and he just slammed himself against the wall. I think that someone with a little bit of experience could have saved that, and luckily he didn't get hurt. That's the most important thing.
Not just that, coming out of a caution that they came in tires could have been a factor. And thank God for those safer barriers, because he hit that inside wall very, very hard.
Yep.
And speaking of that, as far as the accidents, there's one thing that I did notice, even with the incident of James Davison, the first caution of the race, is that with the fire, I did notice that the drivers were having a hard time getting out of the cars.
Yes. And I'm very concerned with that, because that's something that they missed it. And I have to say, the Formula One approach, I like that approach, because you can see that the guys can get in and out pretty quickly. I was surprised that, after every of these, small accidents or big accidents that happened during the race, no one could just get out of the car by himself quick. And that could be a problem. That's something that needs to be addressed. Maybe they have to work something out, but it seems that it's not easy for these drivers to get out of the car. And that's a problem.
Yeah, that race concern, which was a very strange failure on that right front of James Davison's car.
It seems like the brake caliper failed. To me, that's what I think the brake caliper, just it locked itself and then exploded. And after that, it was just, you got the brake fluid coming into the hot rotor, so it's going to, any spark is going to ignite it, and that's what happened.
Right. Speaking of the other Aero McLaren, Pato O'Ward had a great finish yesterday. Yeah. He, top rookie, even though he tried after what happened last year, where he wasn't able to make the grid, but he had a great outing yesterday. Very impressed with his maturity. I think even though the experience is not there, but this year he has shown that he has matured a lot compared to prior years.
he is a very good driver. He has shown that he's fast, and with just a little bit of coaching and just more experience, he could be a contender for the future. I mean, I think he's doing great, and finishing Indianapolis itself is a big deal. Finishing, in the top 10, it's very, very impressive. Finishing in the same lap within the same times, that's something very impressive. And you can see that, good or bad, most of the Indy 500s are won by bigger teams. And the bigger teams, the only difference is that they have experience on their crew. Those mechanics, they've been at it for 20, 30 years, and they can sense in the air, okay, we need something more of these, or we need something less of that, just based on their experience. And I'm sure if you were to put Pato O'Ward in a Ganassi team, he could be pretty quick and as good as a Rosenqvist.
Yeah, he was very close to have his first victory earlier this year. Not the same luck for Fernando Alonso. He wasn't really part of this race.
Oh.
He just logged laps. Probably was his last Indy 500 of his career, now that he's going to be joining the Renault team next year in Formula One. And they already said that they will not allow him to compete in this race. He's 45 years old by the time, he gets out of those 2 years of that contract, 45, 46. It'll be hard for him to be part of the grid.
You have to give him credit. He tried, and, it's something that very few people have been able to do. But at least, look, from the point of view of a racer, I mean, to be a F1 world champion, to run the Paris-Dakar, to run Indianapolis, to be, to win the 24-hour Le Mans, to be a champion in sports car racing, all of those are big accomplishments.
It's a lot in the resume. So, absolutely. There's a lot there in his resume. And, the guys that just pretty much run this race, like Helio Castroneves, probably his last outing as well at the Indianapolis 500. I don't think he will have another shot to become a four-time champion. But even Juan Pablo Montoya said that time that he filled that fourth car for Penske, he said that I will never do it again, because the rhythm is different. You're not in that rhythm of stepping in the car every other week or, on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
And trying to learn everything in just 1 month. It's not enough time. The rhythm is not there. The chemistry with the team, it takes time to build. It's totally different. So
and getting used to run these cars at 200 mile an hour, when you're doing it, every weekend, you just are much more confident. You can say I'm confident, but it's not the same if you're doing it 5 days in a row, right? The sixth day, you're going to feel much more comfortable. So if you're running from March, February, if you're running the whole season, mm-hmm. The car, you're matching yourself to the car. Every car is different. Every chassis is different. We've seen that through the years. There's an accident and a driver gets into supposedly the same car, right? And then they can put all the same geometry, same tires, everything, but that car, the chassis is not going to feel the same. So to try to run, on a single event, if it's not a top team, your chances of being on the podium are very, very slim today.
Yeah, driving styles are different. Again, going back to the aero screen that you talked about earlier, it also affected the gas mileage, the fuel mileage in this race. It got to a point where the drivers were just slowing down so much that they didn't even want to lead the race. It got to the point where Scott Dixon and Alexander Rossi were just trading places for the lead, just so they can actually hit that fuel mileage dot that they needed to hit, which it becomes part of the race, but it's just something that something that they
unfortunately it's part of what today is the Indianapolis 500, where there's some strategy. You're limited to the amount of fuel you have, so you gotta think about how to manage that. I would like to see it no limits. That way you can go as fast as you want all the time. But we already know that it doesn't matter if it's F1 or sports cars or any of these formulas. Once you put a no limit on fuel, then the cost of the engine development skyrockets, because now, you can give it as much power as you want. There's just no limit. You can use as much fuel as you want. So if you can, do right now is a 2.3, 2.5 miles per gallon. So if you can go to one, well, you're going to have a rocket. Yeah, maybe you have to stop one more time, but it's going to be so fast. So at some point, you have to limit that, and limiting the amount of fuel that you use is a way to limit, the horsepower.
Another thing was the Chevys. Uh, Chevy had a tough
They
day
were running.
Sunday.
There were Chevys in Indy this year.
Yeah. Yes, and very disappointing day for Chevy. They said that they found something that doing for race day they were going to come up with something, but the fastest Chevy is what Newgarden on fifth, which wasn't even a factor. But
And he did a great race, though. I mean, I give credit to Newgarden. I mean, he played his own strategy, which worked out at the end. I mean, he started way back. I mean, so so to finish, on fifth or sixth place is still an accomplishment. But
very disappointing day for Chevy, and I mean, I don't know where they go from here. It's the biggest race of the year. They haven't really shown during the regular season. Scott Dixon with their Honda, always doing a great job finishing on top, and they just need to find something.
Well, it is difficult, and I don't know really how much the GM performance division has been affected by all this pandemic that is going on. It's a big corporation. Their racing department is quite different than HPD. HPD, I mean, I had the opportunity to be on both, and I can say that HPD, it's really, it's its own entity, it's its own location, small group of engineers, all they work in the same location, all the time, year after year. They do a lot of testing with the dynos and so forth. They work with the teams, and I think GM it's in sort of like on a different scale, where there's more sort of corporate. There's more people involved and more decisions, people making decisions. I see the difference between the Indy program with the sports cars team. You see the Corvettes. That's the Pratt Miller team. They're the same thing. It's just that's all they do. They don't do anything else, and that's why they're so successful, because it's just a handful of people. They're just focused on that. I think maybe the IndyCar program has suffered this year from this pandemic that is going on. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just thinking out loud what I think it could happen, because definitely we expected more from Chevrolet to be more competitive. I don't know if I'm winning or not, but at least to have more cars in the top.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not really sure, because I know up to a few years ago, they were actually subcontracting Ilmor to develop their engine program. So I'm not sure if Ilmor's still involved with Chevy at this point. But it's only a 2-engine series, and to have your competitor always be in the front, it's not good for their publicity. So what do you say? This is something very controversial, obviously, was the ending of the race. Were you in favor of finishing this race under yellow, or would you much rather had the red flag?
Well, it's very difficult, because first of all, it's great that Piggott really didn't suffer any injuries. The way he hit the wall, I was surprised, and he told me how old I am, because I remember a very similar accident, and I'm trying to think the name of this driver. It was a young fellow that he ended up being in a wheelchair for a long, long time. Exactly same spot, but he hit the concrete barrier. Safe barriers did not exist at that time, and he hit pretty hard. And the problem is that you need these safe barriers to be in place. The impact was so big that it was going to take maybe half an hour or more to put all that back together. It wasn't just that they had to remove the car from the racetrack and clean the racetrack. It had to do with a safer barrier and being at the entrance of the pits. So now it's a very difficult call, because now you're talking about safety issues. So let's say you let them run again the 3 laps or whatever. How about if by some reason, another accident happens and that wall wasn't fixed? Then who is to blame there? So it wasn't a decision, I think, that it was an easy to make. And because in today's contracts, everything has to be by the dot, and there's a limited time, there's TV coverage, so there was a lot of contracts that were going to be infringed. There were a lot of contracts in place that will have to be modified, and and I don't think they could have done it in such a short notice. So, is the right call? It's a very difficult call, but safety has to be the number one choice.
I agree with that. The one thing that I again and I've mentioned this to you before is and not just with IndyCar but with all the series in general is the inconsistency. That's one of the things that I'm always against, the inconsistency of the rules or the way that they make these calls, because a few years ago when we had the finale here in Fontana within the closing laps, it was championship decision race and they red flagged the race because we wanted to see an exciting finish under green. In this case is the Indianapolis 500. I think it would have been different if we would have fans in the stands. I think the fans waiting this long for this race to happen,
Yeah.
they probably would want to see this race finish under green.
Yes.
They deserve it. I do believe that they deserve it waiting this long, but because of the situation, we got what we got and I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
But that was the only thing that
and I agree. I think that by not having the fans on the stands, I think also that weighted on the decision, because no one would have been happy not to see, the end of rains. I mean, there were 5 laps. If it was maybe 2 laps left, maybe, but within 5 laps, you could still, run 3 laps, a dash. But I think in terms of safety, they could not put that back together the way it should be. And I think that was the call. I feel bad because really we're never going to know. I think Scott Dixon was ready to charge on the last lap. And we have seen in the last 5 or 6 years, the race is being decided on that last lap. And whoever is leading is just a sitting duck. It
Right.
happened to Marco before. It happened to Sato before. I mean, it's just all these last couple of races that have been won on turn 3 and 4, Once you get in the second straight, with the draft, the car is able to pass, there's nothing you really can do it, because
Right.
you can't really block. So I think Dixon had a great opportunity to get his second ring, but it was not meant to be.
Yeah, I think if you're a Scott Dixon fan, of course you wanted to see a restart in those final 3 laps or whatever. But do you think that this is something where IndyCar can implement a rule, or that NASCAR implemented years back, of finishing this races under green, multiple attempts to a green white checker, or to not have the fans leave the racetrack with a race that ends in yellow?
Well, especially for Indianapolis, it's such a big event. And, there's a lot of people that follow it, including myself. I follow the Indy 500 just because of the history, tradition, and all that. So I know there's a lot of people that, especially in that area. I mean, it is a national event, but also for the city of Indianapolis and the surrounding area, it's such an important event. It's part of that mix, It's like if you are in Long Beach, the Queen Mary, it's always been there, and it's part of the city, the Indy 500, it's something that is special every year. So everybody wants to see the race ending as a race, not as a, with canceling really the last couple of laps. So I agree that it would be good to see something being done. So at least this event ends under a green, racing flag.
And to some point, it is a race that has different rules. I mean, no other race starts with a 3 white start, or there's no, there's no a three white start. This is a month event that takes a whole month to take place. So I think that maybe adding that to where we can actually see this race finish under green will be something that could be added.
And I think it's possible. I believe that wall could have been repaired. Maybe they've taken an hour, but I think within an hour they might be able to have it ready. But again, it's a very difficult situation. And also, you have to think that when Spencer Pigot got out of the car, he was not in that good of a shape, So you have to think that if you were to rush the race and then the worst thing happened, and then, 5 minutes later they said, yeah, Spencer Pigot, passed away at the hospital, then it would have seemed, was that the right call to make, to continue the race while he was at the hospital? I mean, none of these decisions are easy to make, but
Right.
it was a big impact. That's for sure.
And also TV. I think TV had a lot to do with it as well. At the same time, the NASCAR race at Dover was going on, the Monster Miles. So it's just I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of the IndyCar stewards to make that call. And like you said, there's so many things that are put into play. But I'm glad that Spencer Pigot is fine. And the last report was that he was awake and alert when we got to the hospital. So it was good to see. I am really looking
he
forward.
was released from the hospital already, so we know that he's okay, and I'm sure he'll be there next year again.
Absolutely. And I can't wait for next year. I think next year is going to be an event that it's going to bring back this year of the how everything evolved, and the how weird it was to not see fans in the stands.
Fans will like to see your regular Indy 500. And who knows, maybe there is another engine manufacturer that will be running.
Did you see John Todt was present?
Of course. And, now Penske is a businessman. You have this big facility, you got to use it. And I think it would be great to have Formula One back into in Indianapolis.
So for those of you that in the Zoom meeting, you have a Ferrari picture there, and it sounds like Ferrari has some interest in coming into IndyCar. Your thoughts on that?
That I don't know. I just don't see how Ferrari could, especially since they're not doing well, right now. So to embark in an American experiment, I don't think it'll be so easy to do. If Ferrari was at the top, maybe you can justify it, but I don't think that the company can risk to not do well at Indy at the same time that they're not doing well in Formula One. I think that could be very negative for the brand, and I don't think they will want that exposure.
I think to begin with, because McLaren did it. McLaren, they aligned with Smith Peterson, and Ferrari. I think that if they align with a team, with an existing IndyCar team, to get their feet wet and to get the process going, I think that will be a possibility for them to start doing it that way. But just to come in as a Ferrari team, happened to McLaren last year. Look, they tried to qualify for the Indy 500 and got kicked out. Yep. So I do believe that if they come in with another established team in IndyCar, they might get their program going that way.
I agree with you. The only thing that is just, I don't see this mix of Italian passion and with the American. I just don't see how that could work, and that's my worry. And even when Alfa Romeo was at IndyCar, that really never took off. And they had everything, and at that time, Alfa Romeo was running Formula One, and they were very successful. So it's not easy. For McLaren, I think it's just being the United States a big market for their cars, and not having the volume, and not having that brand identity, just like Ferrari. I think it was more of a natural to say, yeah, we can risk this. We know our clients, they're very loyal. So I think that was the right move. For Ferrari, I think it's a risky move to try to do Indianapolis.
I would love to see him. I would love to see him here in America racing in ovals.